Hi, and thank you for listening to Dream 10X Radio, where we interview people attempting to live extraordinary lives. Our twofold purpose is to both direct and inspire people bold enough to do the same. Dream 10X. Face your fears and make your life count.
We're live.
Hey, Dream 10Xers out there, it's your boy JC.
And Dr. Cable.
And welcome to episode 56 of the Dream 10X podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about the book, The Plantagenets, which was written by Dan Jones. And I don't know if you've seen the show on Netflix, Great British Castles.
That's a really good show.
But he's the host of that show. And it's a really fun show to watch, learning about castles. But before we get into this book, I want to do a little commercial about our latest software product release that we just put out this week. It's called Viking Rose, and it's software for the frustrated Viking that helps you have fun while you do indoor workouts. And here it is running on an Android tablet as a progressive web app. And so we just got finished doing a rebranding from Nautilus Tracker to Viking Rose. And Nautilus Tracker software is now going to be our parent company, and Nautilus Tracker is going to be a purveyor of kick-ass software and content, whereas our first software product that we're releasing is Viking Rose. We also produce this podcast, Dream 10X, that you can find on dream10x.com. So please check us out. We would love to have you using Viking Rose. It's out there live now, vikingrose.com. Okay. That was an awkward transition.
And go!
The Plantagenets by Dan Jones. Great book, very easy to read, lots of fun, good stories, very exciting stories about the history of England. And it really all starts with the Battle of Hastings in 1066. You've heard of that in history class, right?
Yeah.
That was when William the First, or William the Conqueror, went across the English Channel from the northern France, which is the Normandy region, into England, and basically conquered England. And he was a Norman. William the Conqueror was a Norman, and the Normans were basically Vikings. So speaking of Viking Rose, we're talking about the start of the English, the British Empire, the English Empire, British Empire. Before it was British, it was English, and it was really the whole thing with all the kings of England and all that really got started with the Vikings, because William I was basically a Viking. He was a Norman. So that, I think, is really intriguing. But the Plantagenets were actually, the House Plantagenet were actually the family line that reigned over England for 245 years.
It's a long time.
Following William the Conqueror's conquering of England.
Yeah.
So it all starts off, I'm not going to go through the whole history, but I just want to talk about my top 5 takeaways on how the Plantagenets maintained their power as kings and queens of England.
Okay.
What were those 5 things that allowed them to remain, the House Plantagenet, remain in power for that 245 years?
Yeah.
That's a long reign.
That's a long time.
And what they accomplished during that time was really phenomenal. And it was really intriguing how they did it. So William the Conqueror comes in. He's now king of England. People challenged him left and right, and he defeated them all. And then one of his sons came to power. Henry I, became king. And his son, that he was grooming to be the succeeding king from him after Henry I, was they called him William the Eighthling. But he died in a shipwreck in transit from Normandy to England.
Oh, wow.
And so that kind of left the succession of kingship up in the air, and didn't know what to do. As fate would have it, Henry I had a daughter who married some emperor guy in Germany. He was a German emperor of something, I don't remember. And he died. And so Henry I said, hey, Matilda, her name was Matilda, you got to come back to England because I need to plan my succession, and I need you to help me to do that.
Yeah.
So he had lost a son, but now he had his daughter, and he wanted his daughter to help him because she had a lot of connections, being the queen at one point of an emperor. So he brought her back to England, and there was this guy in Anjou, which is a region of France. And if you come from the Anjou region of France, Anjou was a large swath, a big territory in what we call today France. Mm-hmm. And there was a guy there. His name was Geoffrey Plantagenet.
Ah.
And first of all, do you know what a Plantagenet is?
I have no idea.
A Plantagenet is the name of a yellow flowering kind of a bush-like plant.
Huh. Okay.
He used to wear that flower in his ear for whatever reason.
Why not?
He was a flower child. And became known as Geoffrey Plantagenet.
Cool.
And his father was King Fulk V.
Ah.
And King Fulk is a very strong name, I think.
Is.
It's kind of
Hulk,
Folk. I don't know. It's just a strong name. But one of the interesting things about Fulk V was he got tired of the Anjou region or whatever and wanted to be king in Jerusalem. So he left and became king of Jerusalem.
Wow.
And the Middle East,
surprising.
Fighting and ruling in the Middle East was like a big pastime of these kings in Europe.
Crazy.
It was very odd. And so I'm still trying to assimilate. What does that all mean? Why do they love the Middle East so much? And I don't know if it was because of true religious beliefs at the time, or if it helped in their maintaining their power and control in some way. And so
that one.
Yeah, I want to learn more about that relationship there with the Middle East. But okay, so anyway, Plantagenet, Geoffrey gets hooked up with Matilda. Mm-hmm. They get married, and now he and they eventually become the king and queen of England and begin the Plantagenet family line.
Wow.
So right there, it's like when it's interesting that the Normans are the ones who started the conquering of England, but then Geoffrey Plantagenet, who's essentially French, he comes from the French region, even though I guess technically he's not considered French since he's an Angevin, from the Anjou region, but I don't know, I consider him French. And so I think that whole thing is interesting. It's really the French who came and established this central ways of allowing the Plantagenets to maintain power in England. The first one was castles and cathedrals.
Castles.
So castles was a technology, and it didn't really exist at the time until William the Conqueror went in and conquered the southern coast of England and then started spreading out. And they had the Motte and Bailey type of architecture at the time, which is basically just the sticks, wooden poles in a row, and then a kind of a moat and a hill with a keep on top of that, all made out of wood. But then that quickly evolved into making all of that structure out of stone. And those became extremely valuable offensive and defensive technologies for the military strategy and for moving out into the land and conquering more territory that way. Cathedrals also. So in building these large castles, a big part of that stone building technology went into the people's faith. And the result was beautiful cathedrals getting built alongside the churches. And I found it interesting to learn about the relationship between the church and the king and kind of wielding power together, hearts and minds of the people kind of thing, because the people are important in establishing your power as king over your dominion. And so the church played a very important role in that regard. Kind of exemplify that was the story of Thomas Becket, who was placed, I forget if he was placed as a bishop or something in the Catholic Church, and he was placed there by Henry II because he wanted to have his man in the church so he could have greater control and influence over that piece of his power, because the church wielded a tremendous amount of power as well as the king at that time. And so Thomas Becket was his man. But then Thomas Becket, kind of fell in line with the church and didn't want the king pushing the church around like the king wanted to. And that led to really bad blood between the two, and ended up Thomas Becket getting martyred and all that. Very interesting story, because that kind of highlighted the dichotomy between the king and the church at the time.
There's a really
the castle
good,
and the cathedral.
There's a really good movie documentary on Netflix that is all about Thomas Becket.
Really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We should watch it.
Yeah, okay.
Was it look boring?
No, it's really good. Kieran,
you've already seen it.
Yeah, I'll totally watch it again. It was really good.
Really?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I didn't hear about it. I didn't know about him until now. So, so Thomas. So I also wanted to mention that cathedrals. I've always loved cathedrals, even as a kid. Grew up in Europe, and cathedrals were a thing. And then I kind of got used to them as a kid. And you come back to the States, and there's nothing but like McDonald's and Burger King buildings everywhere. But in Europe, there's these huge cathedrals. Like I still to this day am just fascinated by that. Like
coming to America is culture shock after living in Europe, I think.
Yeah. It's really sad in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But hey, capitalism, right? But
McDonald's is a real estate company, right?
Yeah, exactly. They all are. Yeah. But the money and the time and the energy that went into building these cathedrals is phenomenal. And one of my favorite cathedrals in Europe is in Freiburger Münster. And I put a link in here to that. It's not an English cathedral. It's in Germany, a little town in Freiburg, but it just fascinated me when I went there to visit. It took over 700 years to build this thing.
700 years?
It was built in 1120.
Whoa.
1120.
Whoa.
Right at the beginning of the Middle Ages, and it's still there today. Still the same. This is one of the reasons I love like castles and cathedrals, is because they stand the test of time. You build those, and they're just forever, and they're gorgeous. They're just amazing. Anyway, love those. Love castles and cathedrals. Number 2, sea power. So the Normans were Vikings. They had the sea in their blood. That's how they conquered everybody. And so that once they came into England, of course, that pervaded their culture is their love of the sea, their ability to go to sea and maybe not be comfortable, but know what to do when they're at sea. It's in their DNA. Plus, when you think about the UK and Scotland and Ireland and Wales and France, lots and lots of coastline that needs to be defended. So it's obvious you got to have a strong navy. And they did. The kings, the Plantagenets, spent a lot of money on their navy, and they had a very strong naval force. And one battle in which this was really exemplified is when one of the navy battles they had with France in the Battle of Sluys, where they just wiped out the French. The French wiped out the French. It's so funny. They are basically French. And so anyway, that just helps exemplify that having a strong naval power was essential to their ability to hold on to power and expand their influence in the region. Number 3, marriage is for peasants. The Plantagenets did not marry for love.
Interesting.
I don't think one of them married for love. Dang. It was all about, who's this? What kind of girl does this king have over there? What kind of guy does this, this family have over here? And what can they offer me? It was all about the alliance through marriage and what was to be gained in that relationship.
I guess we're peasants, though.
It's good to be a peasant. So there's lots of examples of that throughout the book. The kind of the sad thing is some of the marriages, some of the wives, and even the sons when they got married were in their teens. One girl was 12 years old, and she was now the queen to a guy who was in his 20s. I forget I think it was Edward
gross.
Or somebody like that, but. You can't consummate the relationship, but you got a lot of land and power in the deal, so that's what matters, right?
Yeah.
So, love might be overrated. I don't know. Nah.
Good answer.
Royalty is about leadership. This is my 4th one. I got the order here wrong. 1, 2,
Yeah, so
3,
that's 4.
4. Royalty is about leadership. And so I was thinking about this. Well, so many people wish they were of royal line, you know, so they could say they were related to a king or a queen. But I got to thinking about that there's so much more to that we don't really understand.
Yeah.
To be a king and a queen or a queen required a lot of leadership ability, the intelligence to wage war, the intelligence to know what people were telling you, and the wisdom to discern, you know, am I being manipulated or not, or what's gonna happen to me if I follow their
And
their
at 15,
advice.
how did they even?
At 15, well, they were being groomed constantly. If you had an heir, you were being groomed.
Yeah.
If you had a male heir, especially, you were being groomed. That was your raison d'etre. That was why you were brought into the world, was to someday become king. And so from that very point, you were being trained and raised in that. So it was part of your DNA. So that was just maybe a minor nuance there, but it's just like breeding a dog or an animal to have certain traits. Royalty was bred to have certain traits. So it's not just being related, you're being bred to be a certain kind of human, to be able to lead your troops in battle, where you could die, but it's part of who you are. It's part of what's expected of you, is to lead your people into battle and to win. This just kind of blows my mind just thinking about that. There's a lot involved to being royalty, and I don't know if I'd really want that responsibility. Okay, and 5th, and finally, I'll say that the people of the realm mattered to the king and to maintaining, and the queen, and in maintaining power. And you need to treat those people decently. Otherwise, your grip on power is going to erode, and you're going to lose it.
That's just like in business.
It's like a law of nature. It's the law of the universe. You can't ignore the people that you're governing, and you have to take care of them. And I think it was King John who was one of the ones. The Plantagenets started getting more and more power as time went on, and as they became more and more successful, they got drunk with their power and thought they could just do anything, and that the church didn't matter, and that people didn't matter, and their law was the law of the land. And so it took a lot of struggle for the people and the church and other powers in the kingdom to kind of say, hey, there has to be a contract between royalty and their subjects and the realm to govern behavior, because you can't just run roughshod over it. You can't just tax people to death. You can't just. They were taxing the Jews like crazy because they had the money. They were taxing feudal landlords like crazy, and people were just getting oppressed, and they were throwing people in jail without any trial.
Help! I'm being oppressed.
No, this is real oppression. They were killing people without, the king could just off with your head for no reason, without any trial or anything. It was really bad. So what happened was the creation of the Magna Carta, which was basically a constitution. It was a contract between the people and the church and the king, and said, hey, this is the way you have to treat us. This is how our relationship needs to work. This is a law of the land. And the king railed against it and said, no, you can't tell me. And it took a long time for the Magna Carta to actually get some teeth and to actually work. But it didn't go away. And now we have democracies as a result. The U.S. has a constitution, and you see the same thing. Politicians and people in power rail against that thing and want it to go away because they want absolute power. That's just the nature of power, I guess.
And humans.
So those are my 5 power takeaways from reading this book. Dan Jones's The Plantagenets. I absolutely loved it. Very easy to read, a lot of pages, but very clearly written and a lot of fun to read about the history of England and the Middle Ages, and highly recommend this book.
Awesome.
Thank you. So don't forget to click subscribe and like on our YouTube videos and listen to our podcast, and please visit vikingrose.com. And thanks for watching Dream 10X and for listening to us. We will see you next time. Bonne chance.
Bonne chance. Au revoir.
Au revoir.